Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reality Bites, the show where we talk about the greatest hits that reality TV shows have to offer. My name is Jake Schaff, and this is really happening. This is an idea I have been sitting on for a very long time, and one that I'm really excited to be pursuing, and one that I'm really excited to be showcasing to all of you guys right now. So, first off, a little bit about me in case you guys are brand new to this channel and you've never heard of me before. I have been a fan of reality competition shows ever since I was a little kid. I've been watching Survivor ever since I was 6. I've watched The Amazing Race ever since I was 8. I've watched Big Brother ever since I was 13. And along the way, I've picked up a bunch of other shows like Hell's Kitchen, MasterChef, American Idol, The Voice, pretty much any big one there is on the main networks, you name it, I've probably seen it, and I've probably followed it pretty closely for a period of time. But anyway, this show is going to be talking about the latest episode recaps from the reality shows you guys know and love. Having watched reality TV shows for a very long time, naturally that means I have a lot to say. And I've always toyed with the idea of turning these thoughts into sort of like a retrospective show, a podcast, whatever you want to call it. And I decided to finally pursue it. And I thought if I'm going to pursue it, I got to do it right now when this season has just started. And of course, what season of Survivor is better to start with than such a monumentous occasion like Winners at War? This is an incredible accomplishment for Survivor, 20 years in the making, and 20 of the best winners the show has ever had, all competing for a $2 million grand prize, which, as Jeff Probst said, is the largest money total grand prize winnings of any reality TV show in history. Or at least what I can think of. I can't think of anything else that was bigger than that. But this is a huge achievement, and especially with the crop of 20 winners you have competing. We have Ethan Zahn from Africa, Sandra Diaz-Twine, the winner of Pearl Islands and Heroes vs. Villains, Amber Mariano, the winner of All Stars, Danny Boatwright from Guatemala, Yul Kwan from Cook Islands. We have Parvati Shallow from the winner of Micronesia. We have Boston Rob Mariano, the winner of Redemption Island. We have Sophie Clark, the winner of South Pacific. Kim Spradlin, the winner of One World. We have Denise Stapley, the winner of the Philippines. Tyson Apostle from Blood vs. Water. Tony Vlachos from Cook Islands. Natalie Anderson from San Juan del Sur. Jeremy Collins from Cambodia. Michelle Fitzgerald from Ko Rong. Adam Klein from Millennials and Gen X. Sarah Lucina from Game Changers. We have Ben Drybergen, I think that's how you pronounce it, from Heroes, Healers, and Hustlers. Wendell Holland from Ghost Island. And Nick Wilson from David vs. Goliath. Quite the impressive crop of people competing for the $2 million prize. Sorry, gotta get used to saying that. So let's dive into what exactly happened last night on the first episode. It was called Greatest of the Great. And of course, since this is a 2-hour episode, this is probably going to be a bit of a longer recap. I mean, after this, the episodes from here on out should be shorter, given the shorter episode of Survivor that there is to watch. So, of course, the episode starts with all 20 contestants landing on the beach and everyone sizing up the competition for the first time. And, of course, that's when we get probably our first grudge of the season, which caught me a little surprised at first, but now that I've had time to sit on it, makes sense. With Sandra offended to see Boston Rob on the other side, stating that they spent 36 days together on Island of the Idols, and he never mentioned at all the fact that he was coming out to play again. But the question is, did she mention it to Rob that she was going to play again? I don't think she ever talked about that. But already, grudges are starting to form, and I don't know if this is a theory of Sandra. Maybe she just wants an excuse to go after Boston Rob. Because, of course, they're probably the two biggest kingpins of Survivor. Naturally, they're going to want to go after each other. But, of course, for right now, they're on separate teams, and that is going to have to wait for a little bit. But Sandra's already gotten her revenge in, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So everyone arrives on the beach, and of course Jeff Probst explains the rules. He explains Edge of Extinction, which is already a big difference from the first time the Edge came into play, where the first time nobody knew that the Edge of Extinction even existed until halfway into the game, whereas this time they're just flat out giving everyone that looming threat right from the start, which is definitely going to change everyone's perceptions on how to play the game and how to vote people off right from the start, and has surely already affected some of the biggest eliminations so far. Once everyone's settled in, Jeff Probst decides to celebrate the occasion. As he said, it's a once-in-a-reality TV series moment, and he brings out the champagne glasses. And one thing I noticed that when everyone was drinking from the champagne is that some people were inspecting the glasses once they got them, probably to see maybe the glasses have some sort of writing on them. Maybe there's an advantage in one of them. Already, everyone's minds are in game mode. They're thinking, oh yeah, guys, this is a great celebration. Happy to be here. While all the meantime, just glaring at that glass through every conceivable angle. Which, of course, makes sense with the crop of players we have. And of course, along with the champagne toast, Jeff Probst also takes the opportunity to explain the fire tokens, which are definitely going to be shaking this game up in many ways unlike ever before. With these fire tokens, you're able to purchase food, you're able to purchase comfort items, you're able to purchase advantages in the game. I think the tokens are definitely going to be a bigger factor later into the game. I think once we get down to the end and everyone starts to have more tokens under their belt, that's when they're really going to come in handy and people are really going to go nuts with their spending habits and purchase all that they can for these last few days in the game. Now, looking at the items that we saw for people to buy, already I'm looking at the food and the comfort items, and honestly, I'd be surprised if anyone even purchased anything from those lists. I mean, I know we're all out there, I know you're all hungry, and I know you all want some sort of comfort, but with the amount of big game players there are, everyone's going to be looking for some sort of an advantage and some sort of way to get further into this game. And you're not going to get further into the game with coffee and pastries or your own personal hammock. That's not going to happen. And one more interesting thing I noticed during the episode, and this could just be me reading way too much into this, but it was something I noticed immediately right from the start. But when Jeff Probst revealed the immunity idol, like the tribal immunity idol, did anyone get a good look at the eyes in that skull and how they looked suspiciously just like fire tokens? I don't know if those things are glued on or if they're just part of the whole gimmick of the idol, but my gut's telling me those are 2 extra fire tokens, and if anyone was smart enough, they'd probably try to get those eyes out and take those tokens for themselves. I mean, Survivor has pulled moves like this before in the past, especially with the hidden immunity idols, where in Survivor China, you had the idols on the awnings right above the camp, or right where everyone can see them. Or in the Philippines, when the immunity idol was literally just the emblem on top of the box of rice. So it wouldn't surprise me if Survivor decided to pull that move, but like I said, this could just be part of the idol structure, and it could just be just trying to make it match the appearance for the theme of the season. I don't know. But it wouldn't surprise me if in a few episodes we saw somebody trying to dig the eyes out of that immunity idol. And of course, when somebody gives the idol back, everyone's going to notice the tokens are gone, and everyone's going to start to get suspicious over who has those 2 extra tokens, and that'll cause all sorts of extra chaos. So anyway, Jeff Probst reveals the immunity idol and basically says for the first day on Survivor that we are having the first immunity challenge right here, right now, which has never happened before. Never before has there been an immunity challenge before you actually get to the camp. And at first, I wasn't so sure about this twist, because originally I was under the impression that you have the immunity challenge on day 1. That also meant you go to Tribal Council day 1. And I didn't like that idea of somebody just going home or going to the Edge of Extinction after just one day. Like, that's disappointing. That's not how anyone wants to spend their journey on Winners of War. I mean, granted, nobody wants to go home first, but thankfully, Jeff explained that it was actually day 2 that you would have the tribal council, which at least gave people time to reconvene, figure out a plan, and try to pin the target on whoever they could. So the immunity challenge takes place, and the red tribe, Dakal, manages to walk away with the win in a 3-1 victory. So they go back to camp with Flint, while the other tribe, the blue tribe, Sele, goes back to camp with pretty much nothing. No fire, and not only that, but no rice until the day after their first tribal council, which already puts them in a crabby mood and already puts them at a disadvantage tribe-wise. So now we're going to take a look at the dynamics for each tribe as the game started. Let's start with Dakal, since they didn't have anything to worry about with no tribal council or whatnot. So everyone arrives at camp. Everyone's already starting to figure out the shelter. And one thing I realized in these first few minutes is that a lot of contestants are coming into this game playing for a much different reason. A lot of contestants are coming into Survivor this time with something that they didn't have the last time. And that's kids or a family. And multiple times in the episode, you see people talking about how ever since they played Survivor, they've had children, and it's changed their perspective on why they're playing the game and how they have to play it. Like, you saw Tyson explain how he has 2 daughters that he pretty much spends all of his time with, since it sounds like he does not have a job at the moment. Parvati now has a daughter with her husband, John Fincher, who was on Samoa. Amber, of course, Rob and Amber have 4 daughters. Jeremy has 2 more sons. Sarah's got a young son. I know she had the son when she was on Game Changers, but she brought him up again in conversation. Yule has kids. A lot of people are playing this game for their kids. And it also reminds people that I think this is the oldest crop of contestants we have ever had on Survivor. I looked up the average age for Winners at War, and it just narrowly beat out the average age for Nicaragua. The average age for Winners of War is 37.85 years. And granted, none of these contestants are really that old. Like, the oldest contestant on this season is Denise, who is 48 years old. But a lot of the contestants are... Like, there's only a few contestants that are under the age of 30. Like, Sophie, Michelle, Adam, and Nick. Those are the only ones under the age of 30, hence the higher average age. But with these kids' dynamics, it's going to be interesting to see how some of these seasoned players change up their strategies and how they manufacture their games going forward. And already, once Dakal started talking on the beach, alliances immediately started to form, and it brought up a lot of previous dynamics that the contestants who've played more than twice have had with each other. You have the Game Changers trio, which is Sandra, Sarah, and Tony. Sandra got rid of Tony, and Sarah got rid of Sandra. Possibly, maybe everything's forgiven. I don't know. I mean, these are 3 very deceptive players, but they're all talking to each other. It seems like they may have formed some sort of a trio. We don't know. Then you also take into consideration everyone who played together on Heroes versus Villains, like Rob and Parvati and Tyson, which then brings us into something I really didn't expect to become a major talking point for the episode, but this so-called poker alliance, which I had never heard of before. But apparently there was a poker game a year ago, and I knew Boston Rob played poker, but I didn't know he played poker with a lot of these big former winners. But Rob had been in a poker game with Tyson, Kim, and Jeremy, and Tyson made a joke basically saying, if we're all on an island together, this is the alliance we got to stick to. And they're like, oh yeah, totally. And again, he could have been joking, maybe he wasn't. But it's funny how just that little comment stays with so many people and leaves them thinking, you know what? Maybe something is there. I don't know. So that's another dynamic people watch out for. And you already saw Tyson and Kim sort of buddying up together and maybe even talking with Amber, who, of course, is Rob's wife. Which then left the 4 free agents on the Dakal tribe. You had Yul, Sophie, Wendell, and Nick. 4 people who have seemingly all come together, bonded based on the fact that they're not really involved in so many of the Survivor connections or so many of the Survivor previous relationships. Every single one of them played once, they won once, and that's been it. Granted, Wendell and Nick both won fairly recently. Sophie and Yul won years ago. But they started to form an alliance, and I think this alliance is really going to become a major driving force on the Dakal tribe. You saw Yul and Sophie team up in sort of a dynamic duo fashion. It almost reminded me of Sophie teaming up with Coach on South Pacific and Yul teaming up with Becky on Cook Islands. Both of them were part of big dynamic duos. With their duo partners not there, they're now buddying up. And this could become maybe the big power duo that this season needs. They could go deep into the end of the game together, and who knows, this could really become something. I've got high hopes for these two. Although, I would like to point out that there is a previous dynamic that Yul does have with somebody, and that's Parvati. They both played together on Cook Islands, and I'm curious if there's a team switch or if there's a merge, what's going to happen if they're on a tribe together and they reconnect. That's going to be the big question as to how deep Yul's game will go, and if he will remember his relationship with Parvati and utilize it, or just forget about it and send her home. I mean, keep in mind, they were not on the same side on Cook Islands. But in this game, anything is possible, and you never know what can happen. So another dynamic, of course, we have to look about, because I don't think there's any previous dynamic more closely bonded than these two, because these are the only two that are married. You have Boston Rob and Amber, who are now on separate tribes and separately playing this game. And of course, everyone's taking notice of this, because this is probably the only really firm alliance that everybody knows exists. The only alliance everyone knows will never turn on each other. And already people are starting to take notice. Now let's go over to the Sele Dynamics. Already we had, just like we had Yul and Sophie on the Dakal tribe team up, we had another power duo team up on Sele with Adam and Denise. They went into the woods looking for the water well, and Denise was lamenting on the fact that her curse from Survivor Philippines seems to be continuing. And if you don't remember, on Survivor Philippines, Denise never won a single tribal immunity challenge. She went to every single tribal council the entire season, and yet still walked away with the $1 million prize. And which was incredible. And Adam was already asking Denise, could I be your new Malcolm? I want to work with you. And seemingly another duo was formed. The only problem with them is that they were gone for just a little too long, and as many players said, they pulled a rookie Survivor mistake of you don't leave from the group, especially this early in the game. Because even for something as minor as looking for the water well, if you're gone for too long, people are going to start thinking that something is up. So already Adam and Denise got targets on their backs, and I got really worried because Adam is somebody I'm really rooting for because he is the super fan. He's living the super fan's dream. Do I think he's going to win? No, but I at least want to see him make it very far in the game. Another alliance that formed on Sele was between probably the two biggest players on the team, Boston Rob and Parvati. Things didn't work out so well for them in Heroes vs. or things didn't work out well for Rob in Heroes vs. Villains, with Parvati stabbing him in the back. But Rob is willing to put everything behind them. He's willing to work with Parvati. Honestly, I don't see this alliance lasting. I mean, maybe it will for a while, but with how vicious players Boston Rob and Parvati are, I just don't see them working together that closely for that long of a period of time. Eventually they're going to want the other person out, and eventually they're going to want to try and make the big move to get rid of the other person. And probably the biggest dynamic you saw on the Sele tribe was the faction of the old school Survivor players and the new school Survivor players. Because you saw Rob and Parvati talking with Ethan and Danny. And just earlier in the day, Danny was already talking to people about how she wanted to get rid of Rob. And then she mentioned it to people. And then Ben foolishly decided, hey, I'm going to tell Rob that Danny wants you gone. And this brings up another reason why I don't think Boston Rob's going to be sent home super early. I think he's going to last a few rounds. A, for experience, and B, because he's you get starstruck. Ben said it himself, you take one look inside Boston Rob's face and you realize you're talking to Boston Rob, and like your mouth gets numb, you don't realize what you're saying, and Ben just basically revealed all of Danny's plots to get rid of Rob. And then 2 minutes later, Danny and Ethan are asking, hey, want to form an alliance? And Rob seemed willing to do it. I don't know if that was a smart idea to form an alliance with someone who just said they wanted to get rid of you just a few minutes prior. I mean, granted, it's better to have Rob on your side than not on your side, but again, this is an alliance I don't really see working out so well in the future. But again, you don't know until you see the show. And Danny's a smart player. She's got a special place in my heart because Guatemala was the first season I ever watched. Really excited to see her play again. I hope she knows what she's doing. Anyway, day 1 turns to day 2, and it seems like that Adam and Denise are destined to be split up. One of them is probably going to go home after this first tribal council, but then everyone starts bringing up a different idea. They bring up the idea of Jeremy and Natalie. Jeremy and Natalie, of course, they played together on San Juan del Sur. They were very close allies, and after Jeremy was sent home that season, Natalie went into overdrive, and that's what helped her to win that season. Already very close bond, already seemed like an instant alliance, and on day 2, people were starting to take notice of that and wondering if it was a smart idea to split them up instead. It also didn't help the fact that when everyone tried to talk to them about who they wanted to send home, Adam or Denise, they couldn't really seem to make up their mind. They kept going back and forth, and people were really starting to take notice of Jeremy and Natalie. And honestly, when I was watching this, the more I realized Jeremy and Natalie were being targeted, the more I realized how ironic it would have been for Natalie to be sent home first, given how her sister, previously on San Juan del Sur, was the first person sent home of that season. And, just in case you guys aren't completely in the loop on the sisters, before they were on Survivor, they competed on The Amazing Race together. They competed on the show twice. The first time they did pretty well. They made it to like the second to last leg. The second time, not so well. And they were the first team eliminated. So it's almost as if there's a prophecy or some sort of a curse with these two where they're just cursed to be sent home first in some certain way. Natalie and Nadiya sent home first on Amazing Race. All right. Then Nadiya sent home first on Survivor. Well, Natalie seems to have escaped it. All right, maybe she broke the curse. And then the first elimination starts to take place, and everyone is very secretive. Nobody wants to say anything. Jeff Probst even brings this up multiple times, how nobody wants to say any names. Nobody wants any eyes looking at them after their names have been said. Like, everyone is just walking on eggshells around each other before this first vote takes place. Because everyone knows once this vote takes place, that's when the lines are drawn in the sand, and that's when the claws truly start to come out. The votes are cast, and Natalie is sent home first from Winners at War. Surprising a few people, surprising Jeremy and Michelle, who are both left out of the vote. And some people are realizing the fact that Rob and Parvati completely masterminded this specific vote, and that they may have made a mistake in letting them sneak by. So Natalie leaves the game, and she wills her fire token, her only fire token, to Jeremy, which doesn't surprise anyone, and she heads off into the night. So once she gets to the edge of Extinction, we find a different menu on how you can use fire tokens there to purchase certain items. Again, there's food and comfort items, which I can kind of expect some people to use more likely there than in the actual game, because the food you're going to get on Edge of Extinction is probably very, very minimal. You're going to be starving, you're going to be delirious, you're going to want something to recharge your batteries. Of course, on the menu, you also see items like a full power immunity idol that you can use once or if you get back into the game. So you could spend fire tokens on something you may not even be able to use. Fire tokens were things that were I think we've only scratched the surface on how much they can really do. And like I said before, once we get further into the game, that's when everyone's going to start going nuts. That's when the alliances are going to get a lot more complicated, and that's when the relationships are going to be tested, and that's when everyone's going to want to start to have something in their back pockets, and they're going to use every single token they have to get some sort of advantage to make it farther into the game. So as Natalie rests on Edge of Extinction, she gets her very first test or challenge or whatever you want to call it. And you basically have to hike several miles up to the highest point of the island, and there you will find another immunity idol, which Natalie does. The idol's good for 3 rounds, and you must will it to another contestant in exchange for their token. I don't know what would have happened if Sele had lost the challenge. I would have thought she would have given it to Jeremy, but no, if she just gave her token to Jeremy, she wouldn't expect him to give a token back. We'll get to what Natalie did with the idol in just a little bit. Meanwhile, let's head back to what was happening at the camps before the next challenge. Sele was dealing with the aftermath of sending Natalie home, and it seems like the new school players were starting to talk with each other and maybe starting to form their own counter-alliance to Rob, Parvati, Ethan, and Danny. Michelle and Ben were talking in the woods and realizing how Rob and Parvati managed to mastercraft that situation. I'd be interested to see a new school, old school clash on the Sele tribe. You've got 2 very different styles of gameplay, whereas the older school players are more reliant on relationship building and a good old-fashioned social game, whereas the new school players rely on pretty much idols, advantages, and any sort of twist that they can use to their advantage from the game. I'm not sure which side would win out, because honestly, I don't think either of the alliances is super tight and one that I see making it all the way to the end of this game. Like I said earlier, with Danny targeting Rob and all of a sudden turning around and forming an alliance with him, I don't see that one really working out. And with the new school players, I'm not really sure, because a lot of them don't really have those preseason bonds like Rob, Parvati, or Ethan, or those guys have. So that's going to be interesting to see, and I really am starting to think that after this first vote, the targets on Rob and Parvati's backs are starting to become more noticeable and starting to become bigger. They dodged a bullet. They managed to skate by the first Tribal Council unnoticed and unscathed. I think that's going to change when they go to Tribal Council again. Moving over to Dakal, once again you see the free agents playing in the middle, and Yule is once again seemingly observing everything and noticing where the allegiance lies with certain people. He's noticing the Poker Alliance. He's noticing the Game Changers Alliance. And he once again finds himself in a big position of control and power. Very reminiscent to what he was experiencing in Cook Islands, where he seemingly had a lot of control over a very big portion of the game. Although granted, that was in part due to his immunity idol, which had much different powers back then. I think Yule is playing very smart. He just has to remember he has to make sure to watch what he says, and I also don't want him to get too overconfident in his position on the tribe, because once he starts to get overconfident, that's when things are going to go wrong. We go to the challenge, and it seems like that Sele is destined to go to Tribal Council again, and after someone like Natalie was sent home the first round, I was expecting this round for a much bigger name to be sent home. in the second hour of the episode. But all of a sudden, Sele kicked it into overdrive and just powered through, came from behind, and won the immunity challenge, which not only spared Rob and Parvati from elimination, it also finally broke Denise's curse of always losing the tribal immunity challenges. So finally, she will get to experience the feeling of tribal immunity, which is great. So Dakal goes back to camp, and once again, names are being thrown out. It seems names are either being thrown out to the Poker Alliance or to the Game Changers Alliance. I mean, yes, Nick's name was mentioned a couple times, but it didn't really seem like that had a lot of traction to it. I heard Nick's name mentioned. I knew Nick wasn't going home. But I heard Tyson's name mentioned, and I heard Tony's name mentioned. And with seemingly the Poker Alliance being more in the red or more in the wrong, I was expecting Tyson to become the next person eliminated. Which, that would have been disappointing because, again, Tyson's a great player. I thought he was hilarious this episode with just his quick one-liners and just his overall demeanor. I didn't want him to leave, but it seemed like that's the way things were going. Of course, Tony's name, like I said, also being mentioned. And honestly, Tony was trying to play this a lot more conservatively than he did the last time he played. The first time Tony played, he was incredible. He played one of the best games in the modern era of Survivor. The second time he played was not really fantastic. I mean, he shot himself immediately in the foot when he went off to look for an idol 5 minutes into the game. Like, once that happened, I knew Tony was not going to last very long, which was disappointing. But he's smart for trying to play this very, very carefully. And he's smart to try and not make a scene. But of course, you see Tony, you're still going to target him. Doesn't matter what he does, he's still Tony. So tribal discussions continue, and eventually Kim starts to notice that she's being left out of conversations, and she starts to figure out that her, Tyson, and Amber are in trouble. And it led to, not gonna lie, it led to a few awkward moments with Kim. Led to her just nudging herself into conversations, led to just, like, I think when a Survivor fan uploads another cringeworthy moments compilation, I'm expecting those interruptions from Kim to somehow make it onto the list. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just look up Survivor cringe compilations. Trust me, you'll be laughing your ass off for hours. But anyway, Tribal Council comes to be, and it seems like Tyson's now safe. Honestly, I went into this Tribal Council not having any clue who was going to be sent home or what was going to happen. And with how Kim was seemingly making her presence known, I was starting to get worried that she was going to be targeted. And at Tribal Council, Kim, Tyson, and Amber, they're all bringing up the Poker Alliance, and they're all bringing up the point of, you're really going to target people over one conversation they had a year ago that didn't mean anything? And of course they will. These are seasoned players, and they're going to look for any reason and any sort of lead to get rid of you. So the votes come in, and honestly, I am surprised, but also not really, as to who went home in this second round, with it being Amber. I was surprised in that I didn't really hear her name so much when things got back to camp, but at the same time, of course they're going to want to target Amber because she's Boston Rob's wife. And like I said before, Sandra was looking for some sort of attack to retaliate against Rob, to make her grudge known for him lying to her on Island of the Idols, and she managed to find her revenge. Amber was sent home in a 6-3-1 vote, and now she joins Natalie on Edge of Extinction. And of course, she gave her fire token to Rob. So I was a little surprised that Sandra managed to scathe by this tribal. Once again, proving my point that the bigger players, like, they're good players for a reason. Sandra skated by this tribal council completely unscathed. Nobody mentioned her name. And not only that, she now has the first immunity idol of the season, courtesy of the one Natalie found on Edge of Extinction, which really surprised me. But the only reason I can think that Natalie gave that idol to Sandra was for one word: chaos. She knew Sandra was going to be the big target. And with Sandra now having this idol, this is really going to change things. And I have a feeling that she's going to use this very, very soon. And no one is going to expect it. Long story short, this season is off to an incredible start. And I can't wait to see where we go from here. A few quick points to end things as we get into the closing thoughts. One, Ethan. Really great to see him out on Survivor playing again. I mean, he and Amber have not played since 2004, so they haven't played in like 15, 16 years. Really hope he makes it far. He's someone who I think everyone would really love to see win this game, especially after everything he went through. Tony, of course, playing more conservatively. Tyson in general being hilarious. And one more thing, now that the Game Changers trio seems to be possibly something that would form, I'm kind of keeping my fingers crossed for Tony and Sarah to maybe form Cops R Us 2.0. I don't know, but we'll have to wait and see. And one final closing point, one thing I noticed several times throughout the episode, Jeff Probst is really trying to make these older winners, like the people who won Survivor several years ago, he's really trying to make them feel old. Because he keeps bringing up things like, when you won the game, the iPhone didn't exist. There was no Facebook. There was no this. I mean, way to really... I mean, it was making me feel old because I watched those seasons when they first aired. And, God, it's really putting into perspective how long this show has been on and how long it's been able to hold an impact in pop culture. So we see the trailers for the next episode. Obviously, Rob's going to be out for blood. He's going to be seething with rage and will surely want revenge and target anyone who is responsible for getting rid of Amber. And one interesting thing I noticed in the trailers was it seems that the idol hunt has started, but it seems like the idols are being hidden in much more obscure places. Much more harder places, which doesn't surprise me. It's Winners at War. You gotta up the game when it comes to idols. But you see, like, a bunch of the people on the Dakal tribe building like this really flimsy bamboo ladder. Tony's trying to climb it to grab something at the top of some rocks, probably the idol, and it's another big factor as to how hard you're gonna have to work to win this season over how much you've had to work throughout any season you played before. And finally, before I go, I'm going to make predictions for 3 people who I think are in a really good shot at winning this game right now. Whether or not they stay in a great position, that's yet to be seen. But these are my thoughts on who I want to see win and who I think are in the best positions to go far. One of them is Ethan. Like I said before, people are going to root for Ethan because of how much he went through with cancer and battling it and beating it. And he's not exactly a really threatening player. Ethan was one of the nicest guys on Africa, really nice guy on All Stars. And he's looking for redemption. You know he's going to want to win this game. And I don't think he's going to be someone on anyone's radar that much, and I think that's really going to benefit him. And then the other two kind of go hand in hand. We have the alliance of Yul and Sophie. Once again, they're seemingly in the driver's seat for the decisions so far that have been made on Dakal. The free agents decided to team up with Sandra and Tony and Sarah and get rid of the Poker Alliance. And I think if they maintain this non-threatening vibe and kind of stay in the background, that's really going to benefit them, and I really hope to see Yul and Sophie deep into the game. Anyway, that should just about do it for this first episode of Reality Bites. Thank you so much for tuning in. Things may not have been the best structurally sound. Like I said, I'm still working on this. Hopefully, as the season goes on, things will get better. Thanks so much for tuning in, and if you guys enjoy reality shows and you're new to this channel, check out my other channel, 2309MI, where instead of talking about reality shows, I make my own with Pokemon. It's pretty crazy, it's pretty fun, and you guys should go check it out. Anyways, that's it, guys. I will see you next time.